March 20th, March 20th, 2020, and this is, of course, amidst the COVID um, pandemic. And all of us, one thing that's happening in the world is, and I've seen this evolve during the week, is there's this kind of shared experience that the entire world is having, right? It's not just our communities or a segment of our community, but it's actually the entire world is dealing with the same external stressor out there. And so we have two choices when we are feeling stress. We can burn off that stress, right? Exercise or do something active, or stress, a stress response in the body is extra energy to do something that we might need to survive. If a car is about to hit me, then the the brain sends a message to the adrenal glands, which releases epinephrine or adrenaline, and then I jump out of the way. That's the purpose. But there's also a stress response that is more consistent and chronic, the release of cortisol into the system, but that can be over time damaging to us. So we either take action or we learn to downregulate the nervous system. So we're going to do a little biohacking today called meditation. That's what meditation is. It's kind of a biohack. It's training our body to downregulate when we're feeling upregulated. So before we talk about any of the discussion, um, let's get into that. I'm so grateful to have you here today. So I'll ask you first to begin by lowering your gaze or closing your eyes if that helps. And the first thing I want you to do is to breathe in and out through your nose. And I just want you to observe your breath in and out through your nose. Just observe it. You don't have to change it or slow it. Just pay attention to your breathing through your nose. And when you're breathing out, when you're exhaling, you can say, I'm breathing out. And when you're breathing in, you can say, I'm breathing in. Sometimes when we observe our breath, it does tend to slow, but you don't have to do that. Now I'm going to give you a 4 count of breath. What that means is I'm going to count to 4 on each in breath and each out breath. I'll do that a few times and then you can do it in your head yourself. So finish an exhale and then take an inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it up. Try to focus on your breath. Feel it coming in and feel it going out. Breathing through the nose signals to your body that you're not at risk right now. There's no threat. It's also why we breathe slowly. Now I want you to focus on bringing your breath into your belly. not into your chest, but into your belly. So fill up your belly on the in-breath and empty on the out-breath. Fill up your belly on the in-breath and empty on the out-breath. If you hear sounds in the background, that's okay. You can just hear them. Notice if there's any tension in your body. And if there is, focus on it, and I invite you to let it go. Three more deep breaths in and out. Now when you're ready, you can open your eyes and raise your gaze. Thank you for doing that. Welcome. This is just our opportunity to build some community. One of the things that helps us in our pain is, and our worry and our concern is connection, right? We can connect in our pain and it lightens the load a little bit. So we're just providing this for a few minutes each day for our community. And it's been actually healing for me and very, very special for a lot of people. So let's go with the first question. A question came in from our Instagram. Has anyone ever changed the mind of a grumpy uncle or aunt or teenage kid or other family member or friend who has refused to take the coronavirus risk seriously or to participate in the recommended precautions like social distancing? If so, what argument or piece of evidence or visual aid or written creed proved most successful in changing the skeptic's mind? Do any of you have any success with that? Give me a thumbs up if you've had some success. Do you know how to do a thumbs up? I think you click on your name and... Is that how you do it? Or maybe share. You know, we were talking about this last night. There's this balance, especially with our children, between wanting them to be anxious enough to take the necessary precautions, but not so anxious that it becomes harmful to their mental health and well-being, right? That's been a theme. For older people, I've had some success in convincing some people by talking about the benefit to other people. That's been my number one most helpful thing. A lot of people won't do it for themselves, and we even found with our staff initially, you know, before things got really serious, that some of the precautions that we were proactively asking them to engage in, at first they were not thinking it was relevant to them because our staff and young adults and young people are, you know, they're not the high risk group unless they have an underlying medical health problem. So what's been helpful is to talk about the responsibility, the social contribution, the social right thing to do. So that's been one thing for me that I've seen, that where a couple of people have changed their mind. I haven't had any older people that have been reluctant to do it. Grumpy old uncles or older generations. I haven't had any of those in my life that weren't taking it seriously, that I had to convince to take it seriously or wanted to convince to take it seriously. Keisha has just shared a link about an article about flattening the curve. Everybody's now familiar with that terminology about how social distancing and some of the precautions that we're taking will flatten the curve so that there's not a steep uprise in cases where there's then less medical assistance and less services to provide to that need. So um, somebody else sent it in. Great. Somebody else sent it in from us. Someone else said from the chat, I am just working from home for the first time, finding it hard to adjust. Um, yeah, it's a hard adjustment. It's the part of why we're doing this is just so that there's some social connection. People have shared that they've more conscious. We've said this. I said this I think at the outset. Like when we have a new stressor, we have to do something different. I think that's what this has taught me. I've taught it to other people before. When parents have children that are struggling with mental health or addiction issues, you have to do something different. Um, but I came into this virus pandemic not needing meditation, for example, as much, being okay with an infrequent practice of meditation. And I have found since the virus that I absolutely need it. I have found my consumption of social media changing. I cannot indulge myself, especially sitting at home more often. I cannot indulge myself in social media because of the rampant anxiety and misinformation that's out there. And so it kind of requires me to make changes. And I think working from home, doing something different, I think is what we're all learning is that we can't do the same thing and expect the same outcome when there's a new contributing stressor in our lives. So I think you're not alone, and I'm glad you're here. I want to tell you all of that. I can't wait till Monday till you can see each other's names. But I'm really, really glad that you're here because you're not alone. And I think this particular issue of social distancing can make us feel more alone. Even just going out and running errands, right? Running meaningless errands for me was kind of a break and a distraction throughout the day. And while if you had told me 2 weeks ago that I was going to be doing 4 webinar broadcasts this week, I would have said, oh, that just adds to my workload. But now it's like my favorite part of the day. I've been looking forward to this all morning, actually. So adjusting is a good word. I'm struggling. Somebody else says I'm struggling with my. By the way, you folks are welcome to chime in, and I'll read your responses. I don't want this to just be about me and my thoughts. I want you to feel each other during this process. Someone writes in, I'm struggling with my 17-year-old son. His sister was at Evoke this fall. I wonder if he used to be in the jokester role and now is supposed to be the good kid. Could this be a root of our struggle? He refuses to see a therapist. Any suggestions? Would love to take this time to rebuild our relationship. Um, you know, it is, first of all, I think your awareness of the fact that he might need to feel like he needs to be the good kid is gold. I love that awareness. I love how you understand that he might be apt to compromise himself, um, he might be able to compromise himself to help the family function because that's damaging, right? If we have to give up part of who we are so that everybody else is okay, that can be difficult. We all have to make compromises, sure, but we don't necessarily know how to um, find that balance between what do I need and what can I sacrifice that's not a core part of myself. So um, that's a important thing. For the fact that you as a mother um, have that awareness, I think is an amazing parenting skill. Um, I think it's fantastic. It's if every parent could see that dynamic, it really is. I cannot overstate this. So I'm going to just slow down. I cannot overstate that it is the fundamental wound of childhood where we feel like we need to be something for others, for our parents, principally is kind of the primary one, at the cost of the authentic and real self. Because if we become who we are, if we become who we are, then we risk being abandoned and rejected. And that's not tolerable. That's the number one goal for a child. The number one goal for a child on the hierarchy of needs is to not be abandoned by parents. Okay? And so that's going to take precedent over virtually everything. So the fact that you recognize that he might be doing that is gold. In terms of seeking a therapist, you know, I'll talk about outpatient therapy and then I'll talk about Evoke wilderness therapy. Okay, because they're two different categories and really two different questions. For the most part, this isn't always true, but for the most part, I am not a fan of people forcing children to go to therapy, requiring it. It's just therapy is hard when you're extraordinarily motivated. It is really hard. I know because I'm a client in therapy. And therapy is difficult and painful and an upward struggle climb when you're very motivated. That's number one. When you're unmotivated or moderately motivated, it's really nearly impossible to get a lot out of it. So, alternatives to saying to a child, to trying to force or coerce a child into therapy is come to therapy because I need help with me. I think for couples, that's where it starts. And allow yourself, the word isn't quite right, the phrase isn't quite right, but allow yourself to be on the hot seat first. And I don't mean be on the hot seat in terms of being confronted, but talking about you. If you, this parent that wrote this, if you brought in your 17-year-old son, the first session I would talk mostly to you, ask you questions, hear your struggle. I would spend time understanding you. By the way, the thing that would be happening at that time while I was focusing on you, number one, your child would be relieved because they thought the focus was going to be all on them. That lowers the nervous system, relaxes them. Number two, because I'm doing the work to understand you, they're beginning to understand you and understanding that your anxiety is not about them. It's not their responsibility. It might be directed toward them, it might be triggered by them, but it's not fundamentally about them. Like we learn in Al-Anon, my serenity is my responsibility. So they're learning that. So there's 3 lessons already that are fantastic, right? They're relaxing because it's not focusing on them. They're understanding you and your dilemma, and they're realizing that they're not responsible for your peace and serenity. Those are 3 amazing things if you bring your child into therapy. Now, hopefully you have a therapist who's talented and conceptual enough. And if you have one, talk to them about your goals ahead of time, right? That's the way that it would work with therapy with me. Okay. And then lastly, then after we've done those things, then there may be some opening to talk to the child. But see, what's more, I talk about this all the time. What's most interesting to me is not getting a child to behave in the way that we want them to, right? Not getting a child to behave in the way that we want them to, but rather understanding why they're behaving the way that they are. In my first book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, in the chapter on behavioral change, which I didn't even want to put in there because I didn't want the focus to be on how to change your child, but you can't write a parenting book without talking about behavioral change. You just can't. It's unacceptable. At the first part of the chapter on behavioral change, I write this quote that I say, before we go about trying to change a child's behavior, we would be wise to understand what the behavior is trying to tell us, right? And when we do that, our compassion increases, our empathy increases, our relationship to the child and their behavior improves, and we tend to respond in ways that are more welcoming, less anxious. So I'm more curious with your son about why he doesn't want to go to therapy. And I'm not sure that he's going to be able to articulate that to you. And that brings me to my last point in this with this question, which is it might be your need and not his for him to go to therapy. It might be a good part of this work is finding yourself. In the first book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, it's about looking at yourself. In the second book, I call it Finding You. Chapter 1 is Finding You. Maybe it's chapter 2. But the point is when you find yourself, then you start to know the difference between what's your need and what your child's need is. And that is a fundamentally important reorientation that directs then how you respond to the child. And by the way, it is a disciplined practice. It is not a one-time thing. Because our old mother tongue, right? Kind of our earliest learning is that it's about the other person. That I need to figure out how to tweak or pull apart or uncover. I need to do something to the other person to find a sense of peace and well-being. So discover whether it might be your need for him to go, or yeah, it was a son. It might be your need for him to go. And let me say the one last thing. I differentiate outpatient therapy from more significant interventions like Evoke therapy, because when it gets to the point where you are, after doing your work, you are convinced, you're sure, you're confident, or confident enough, I should say, because nobody's 100% confident of anything, right? That's silliness. But you're convinced that they're not safe, that they can't get what they need at home. That's where a more significant intervention than outpatient therapy is warranted, like Evoke Wilderness Therapy Program, right? When you send your child to Evoke, you're saying, it's not going well at home. I don't think you're getting what you need. We're sending you to Evoke because we think you need more than we can give you, right? That's the point that you get to. But that's very different than outpatient therapy, which relies heavily, heavily on internal motivation from the client. Wilderness therapy, it kind of creates the motivation externally, right? Interventions like wilderness therapy, the motivation is external, right? There's structure and there's a context, there's a milieu, there are peers, there's staff, there's activities, there's things that are motivating externally. So that's why you can justify something like an intervention like that, whereas requiring therapy for somebody at home, outpatient therapy for somebody at home as part of a contract, it could work. I'm not saying don't do it, but it's difficult. It's a uphill battle already, and it's significantly uphill. So those are my thoughts about. Oh, one last thought. I lied. One last thought. If you and you may be doing this, so all of these things you may be doing. I never know that, right? When someone asks a question, but in the end, go do your work. The best thing that a parent can do, in my opinion, is do their own work in therapy. When families call us to talk about doing a family intensives, which we do family intensives, I always default to considering having the parent consider to come and do their own work first, if it's a marriage problem. I've shared with you many times that I've been with my therapist for going on 22 years, my current therapist, and I've been with other therapists before I found this one. And I've had one couple session in the last 8 years with my therapist. I've had two sessions with my children with my therapist in the last 10 years. But you better believe that when I'm in therapy, I'm working on my marriage, I'm working on my relationship with my children and others. The foundation of work in our family systems, in our partnerships, is our work. So consider going to 12-step meetings without your child. Consider going to Al Anon or Codependence Anonymous without your child. Consider going to therapy without your child. Consider going, like I said earlier, you can invite your child later. Consider going to an intensive without your child. There is so much benefit from building a stronger, more robust foundation of our own work that helps us in dealing with our children. I think one of the reasons why Evoke is as successful as it is because of what we do with parents, right? I think our program is amazing out there in the field. I've never seen anything that provocative and powerful and dynamic. I think that's true. But I think that the magic dust of the program is this work. And it's non-shaming, non-blaming. It's just you need more support when you have a child that's atypical, that has an addiction, that has anxiety, mental illness, depression, whatever it is. You need more support and more help. So it looks like lots of comments are coming in. So let me get to those before I just chat away the whole time. Um, One of my biggest takeouts this week is a new and deeper understanding of how it feels to not be in control of my life. In much of the same way my teen was screaming out for me to try to understand, way to wake up call to feel our teens' views more deeply. I love that. I've said that this week that this is this is what people are medicating. You know that feeling that we're all feeling? This is what people are medicating. That feeling of unwell and unrest and I can't control the thing that's out there. I said last night when I was introduced to the Serenity Prayer, which I'll share in just a moment, that's shared in virtually every 12-step meeting all over the world every day. I had no idea why that was shared. It made no sense to me. The Serenity Prayer, if you don't know it, goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I mean, think about that. And whatever your belief is in a higher power, whatever your higher power is, or whatever spiritual practice you have, think about that as a meditation if you want to, if you don't believe in a higher power. How much do we all need that right now? Serenity for things that we cannot change, courage to work on the things and do the things that we can do, and the wisdom to know the difference. It's so phenomenal. And why do they share it in every Al Anon, Codependence Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous meeting, Gambling Anonymous meeting, Sex and Love Addiction meeting? Why do they do that? Because all of those things, all of those behaviors, those self-medicating behaviors are being manifested because we're having a hard time finding serenity for things that we can't control. If I can control my alcoholic son, right, then I'll feel better. If I can take a chemical into my body that relaxes my nervous system, then all is well with the world, at least for a few hours. So I love what you're saying. Thank you. And by the way, you and all of you in the chats are building up. Thank you, thank you, thank you for talking and sharing. Next comment. We have open dialogues, my daughter and I, about her being subjugated due to her brother's issues. So wonderful. There is no perfect fix, but just having it out on the table and her and I being able to acknowledge it helps tremendously. You guys, that makes all the difference in the world. I was doing a therapy supervision call with our therapist this morning, as I do monthly, and a Skype, or excuse me, a Zoom call. And I was saying to them, just teaching them, when in doubt, if you feel the instinct to be helpful, to respond to somebody's sharing, consider not being helpful. and consider saying something like, thank you for telling me. I'm glad you're talking about it. It's really important. I feel honored that you would tell me. Think about that. Just think about saying that and watch their shoulders relax. Watch them exhale. I just had a session earlier this morning with an inquiry family, a call from an inquiry family. And at one point, I said to the mother something like that because it was a difficult time. It's a difficult time for her son. And I shared my response just like that. I said, I'm glad you're talking about it with somebody right now, not knowing if she's going to admit her son to the program or not. And I heard on the phone, I mean, I'm not even watching her. I heard her say, just take a deep exhale. And she said, thank you for hearing me. Right? We're just a bundle of nerves, literally. And when somebody can hear us, so beautiful. That's so wise. You know, that might seem like the smallest thing. What you just shared, I'm going to read it again because I want to point this out. This has taken me 20 years to learn as a therapist of how genius this is. And I'm going to read it again because it's so important. 20 years it has taken me to learn to practice this more regularly. One of my biggest, wait, here it is. We have open dialogues, my daughter and I, about her being subjugated due to her brother's issues. There is no perfect fix, but just having it out on the table and her and I being able to acknowledge it helps tremendously. It's taken me 20 years to learn that, to learn the mountain of wisdom in that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you want a reference point, watch Mr. Rogers. Watch the movie with Tom Hanks, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and you will watch it from a non-therapeutic perspective. You will watch the magic of what he did, which I didn't know, not at the level that I know now. One of my biggest takeouts this week is a new and deeper understanding of how it feels not to be in control of my life. Right? More, Keisha? I don't know if Keisha's with me anymore, so I'm going to go without her. Um, let's see where I am. Just give me patient. Oh, you are? I'm just looking for the next post. Can you share more? Are there more? Looks like there was some more. Okay. All right, next post from somebody. The discussions about sometimes using another, like your child, as the container for one's own needs resonates. As I have done my own work over the past 5 years, my child has changed too. He benefited from my increased sense of balance and clarity about boundaries. My child began to struggle again this year and decided on his own to come to Evoke Wilderness. The parent piece is helping me move further into my trying to let go of the anxiety about outcomes. Interestingly, he personifies what you just said about externalized participation. I am using these supports like this group to stay in the present. It's hard for me not to will his next steps. Thank you. You're welcome, first of all. And again, that's beautiful. That paragraph that I just read, just like the other one, it makes my day. I want that. I want what you guys are talking about today and hearing about from each other. I want the whole world to hear this. And I know we're going through a rough time right now, and things are atypical for sure. But I want the whole world to know what you know. It doesn't fix the child automatically, doesn't solve all the problems, but it makes a change, right? Like it makes a palpable change. And even if the child doesn't change in the ways that we hope, which we all love our children so much, we want them to be healthy and safe and have a meaningful life, it changes us. First and foremost, it changes us. And we're learning through this experience, if we, even though we've learned it before, that the change in us makes a change in the entire world. There are dolphins now in the canals in Venice, right? Because we have to stay indoors. Life is trying to teach us something, isn't it? Next comment. Forcing teenagers into therapy. I could not agree more with your message of not forcing our children into therapy. My son is almost 21 years old. He suffered for years and years, and when he was 12, we sent him to his therapist, to this therapist and that therapist. We kept trying every which approach and way. Nothing ever helped, and in fact made things worse because he became very resistant to any attempt to help him. The only thing that helped him was when my husband and I finally accepted him and stopped trying. In the past 12 months, he has completely turned himself around. Still a very difficult journey, but he is now taking ownership with us, being there to love him and support him. Yeah. I don't think outpatient therapy was built for force. I really don't. You know, we were built for a container when kids are unsafe. That's what Evoke is built for. But I don't think the design of outpatient therapy, for the most part, I'm sure there are, I should say this, please allow for me to say this. I know there are exceptions. I know that there are exceptions to this. That luckily you kind of trip over something and find something by accident, and it could happen. I know that that's true, but and I'm going to try to stop touching my face, although I just washed my hands before I walked in here. Um, the outpatient therapy is not built for force or coercion. I and by the way, even if you'd sent them to Evoke, that work that you said that you've done, that's the work to do, right? It's the work to do. People, when they call me and they're considering our program, I say to them all the time, regardless of whether or not you come, here's the work. Here's our podcasts. Here's my book, which, by the way, I've lowered to the lowest possible price that Amazon will allow me to lower. My new book, I've lowered it to the least possible price that is allowed by Amazon so people can have it during this time. Read these books. It's all the wisdom that I have right now to share with you from people like you, from people like your children. And whether or not you end up with us or another wellness program or a treatment program or a rehab or a psychiatric hospital, you will be asked to do the same work regardless. So do it now regardless, right? It's the same work. And it's the work that you talked about. And it makes a difference. Someone posted, just came from Austria from a complete lockdown of the country. And on the journey home, I learned that I cannot allow myself to panic and to rush. I have to slow down even at home and just practice relaxation. My son is a huge support and said that me taking care of myself is truly important to him, particularly on my journey home. Man, I love what you guys are saying. It's so amazing. When parents take care of themselves, children relax just a little bit. And that means taking care of yourself physically, right? Spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. I just had this experience this week. I had a parent tell a son, an adult son, I'm going to be doing my own work. I realize I have some things that I've done, some wounds that I have from my past that I've passed on to you. And I'm going to go work on those. And this 30-year-old son started crying and said, this means more to me than anything. And all of the praise and acknowledgement and admiration that you've given me all over the years, it's nothing compared to this gift. Because when you take care of yourself, they don't have to. That's one of the primary tenets of the book. Because the new book is called, for those of you who don't know, I'll show you it because I'm proud of it. The Audacity to Be You, Learning to Love Your Horrible, Rotten Self. And what I say is, if you don't learn to carry around your horrible, rotten self, your children are going to be inclined to carry it for you. And it's too heavy of a burden to bear. And what I mean by learning to love your horrible, rotten self is look at yourself, take care of yourself. And I mean this with all the love in the world. Realize that you're a flawed human being like all of us and work on it. And when you do that, your children relax a little bit. And so much of mental health and addiction is related to it's this simple. It's the nervous system is upregulated and it doesn't feel safe. You feel unwell. And what do you do when you feel unwell? You do something to try to make it go away. And you know what works really well? Really well? Alcohol, opiates, heroin, marijuana. That stuff works really well to make you feel safe in the short term. It ruins your life and kills you, but other than that, it's perfect. Cutting on yourself works for some people. Restricting eating works for some people, right? Fantasizing or attempting suicide is an escape, right? So if it's all about our nervous systems, our brains, then we need to learn how to downregulate our nervous system. And one contribution you can make to your children is when you take responsibility for your nervous system, they don't have that added on top of theirs. That's magic. Thank you so much. Someone writes, my daughter is living away from home and I am giving her the space she needs right now as she rebuilds herself post-treatment. She knows that I am doing that and that I have always been here for her. I live alone and am finding the social isolation difficult and giving my daughter space difficult. I would love to check in with her and to make sure she's okay, but have been advised not to. I struggle with wanting her to know I love her and making sure she knows I am there for her. Excuse me. I am there for her even though she already does know, my therapist tells me. Wonderful therapist. I also struggle with the long days and nights being alone with a jigsaw puzzle. We've been doing that a lot. Books and house cleaning. Well, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for sharing. And you're not alone in that feeling. I think a lot of us can relate to that. And I think your therapist is a very wise person that she knows that you love her. And it goes back to something that I was talking about earlier, which is when we reach out to our children. See, our children aren't like other people, even when they're adults. We think our 25-year-old, 35-year-old children are just people. They're not. They're always 12 to us psychologically, unconsciously, not psychologically, unconsciously. Around us, we're always their parent. And so they can't contain us. And so when we want to call and to reach out, it takes a lot of work. Something I'm working on still. It takes a lot of work to realize, is this for me or for them? And if I, as a father, and am asking them to take care of me, it's going to be a problem. It's a problem. They are inadequate to the task of containing and taking care of me. I promise you. It's too much. So there's so much wisdom in what you're saying, and I have so much empathy for what you're talking about. And I'm glad you're here because for this hour you're not alone. I better get to some of the other comments and questions. I might just have to read through them. Our daughter went through your program in 2013 and is doing well. In fact, she is training for staff this week in a wilderness therapy program. Nice to get back and a nice time to be in nature for sure. As a parent alum, we've been watching webinars with you over the years. Now more than ever, your support and guidance is really appreciated. Thanks for all your good work, your program, and your staying power. Thank you. You're welcome. It's my joy, my pleasure, my honor. You know, as a little kid that was troubled, I got in a lot of trouble. I overdosed and almost died as a teenager. And I don't necessarily believe that everything is predestined, but I know what my purpose is now. My purpose is to give a voice to all of these children and to show love and compassion to you guys and the painful journey that it is to be a parent of a child who struggles. That's until I'm unable to do it. That's my life. Any more, Keisha? I'm going to wrap up in just a few minutes. So I better go. My 13-year-old son is currently at Evoke in a group of kids who are all adopted besides him. I am a single mom, and my son and I are all each other have at a certain level. His dad is not at all involved, and he's only met him once. And in some ways, he's dealing with the same attachment abandonment issues as the adopted teens in his group. He's been showing incredible self awareness and recognition, and I've made so many changes as well while he's been away. This COVID-19 thing has made it difficult to keep trusting the process, as I'm terrified of not being able to get to him when it's time to pick him up. We've also spent all the family savings on the program, and I sometimes worry whether this was the right decision this early in the struggle, as I know it won't end here. And medical is such a nightmare to navigate to get mental health services. I'm going to respond to this, Keisha, and then save the rest of them for our chat on Monday. I'll read maybe a few thank yous or just short little statements at the end if you want to post those, Keisha, but this will be the last question or long statement that I'll read. I was talking to the therapist this morning. It's a real interesting dilemma to want to be close to your children and to also know that they're safe right now with us. It's a tough dilemma. That's all I can say about that. I can't foresee any situation where you wouldn't be allowed to pick up your child if you needed them. I can't foresee that. Can't imagine circumstances that would dictate that. But the other thing I love about what you're saying is that even if his father was still here, we see everything through attachment. Everything I teach, everything I talk about is about attachment. And I almost said out loud, when I read this part of your statement, I wanted to say this out loud. I am a single mom, and my son and I are all each other have at a certain level. And I wanted to say not right now. Because right now he has a lot. And right now you have something. It's just us this hour, but you have something. And I don't mean to dismiss the genuine, authentic grief, pain, and fear that is in your statement. But Alice Miller, who wrote the best book on child psychology that I've ever read, sold tens of millions of copies. It's called The Drama of the Gifted Child. She said in there, a mother can provide what a child needs, even when she's unable to give it, if at times she allows the child to get it from somebody else. And so I know COVID is really challenging all of this, but if you can take care of yourself, I remember when my son was in wilderness at 13, early in the process, by the way. My son went to wilderness. I sent him early in very early, much more early intervention than most. And it wasn't all done when it was over, but it became this catalyst and this foundation for what has become a very meaningful, rich, successful life for him. He's 27 now and very, very happy and living a really meaningful life right now and graduating with his master's degree here in a month or so. Take care of yourself. Find sources of support. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing what you shared. And if everybody could respond, I'm sure so many people would tell you that they can relate, even though their circumstances might be different. And everything we talk about is about attachment. Even if you have two parents and siblings, this is what this is about. It's about who we are and what our circumstances, first our parents, then our siblings, then our peers, then our teachers, what they taught us about who we are unconsciously, right? That's the word. All right, I have to one comment from another mom. I want to tell that mom that she isn't alone. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for saying that. On Monday, we're going to do this again with names. So you can use a fake name, initials, your full name, your first name, whatever you want. But we're going to do this on Monday with names so you can see each other. I can't wait for that. Actually, I'm looking forward to how that goes and every day. Any other comments? One line comments before I log off. Another thing for that mother, I am a single mom too, with no father in the picture, and my daughter lives away now, but we are all together in this. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you for the joy. As Glennon Doyle says, we belong to each other. All right. I look forward to Monday. Actually, I'll miss you this weekend. Look forward to you Monday night. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll even do it this weekend. I don't know. I have to be there for my family too. My wife's watching, and she'll remind me of that too. Thank you for being with me today and for showing up and for telling your truth and sharing your truth and asking your questions. And for the names that are here, it's good to see you. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend. And if not before then, I'll talk to you Monday evening. Bye bye.